Week one of Disney Lorcana's rotation is in the books. In America, we had three big events, 70 plus players or more. We had 73 players in Pennsylvania, 126 players in Margate, Florida, and down in Orange County, 180 players that came to play this rotation format in week one. There's some questions that need to be answered. Is Amethyst Sapphire too dominant? The stats show that it was the most played, that's for sure. Is Amethyst Steel too good? It won two of those three events, just saying. And of course, is Dumbo a big problem, not just something with big ears? But yes, that is the truth. There's a lot of things going on. We have the breakdown from every single event this weekend, kind of talking about what was registered and what was successful. We're going to be discussing, if you don't have Dumbos, what are the best decks that you can potentially be playing and targeting? And of course, what are the best decks, period, from this weekend? If you're looking for even more in this video, you can just hit our Dreamborn link. It'll showcase every single deck. Just go in, check in the description below. Make sure you favorite some of them. Give us a little bit of love there as well. Once again, shout out to Inkdex. Big shout out to Inkdex. They were able to compile all this information for us. And of course, shout out to the other content creators that were hosting these events this past weekend. We had one. Let's talk about that one first. That's right. TFM hosted the Encounter 9-case event, which was 73 players. You can see here as we're going to walk through these couple of registered events, what was successful. Amethyst Sapphire, Amethyst Steel, Amber Steel. That is the trend of every single event that you see that we are going to report on here, that in that exact order was the amount of registered decks. That was how it broke down in every single tournament. You will see that trend. Amethyst Steel at our event was 22 players. I'm sorry. Amethyst Sapphire in our event was 22 players. Amethyst Steel was 17 or 18 registered player, and then Amber Steel came in at just in over 10. And you can see the trickle-down effect of the rest of the event. Sapphire Steel, Amethyst Ruby, Emerald, Sapphire, Ruby Steel, and Amber Emerald. In our event particularly, only the top 3 decks broke into the top 8. The other breakdown you see here is our friends at Southside Gaming. 126 players came to play this past weekend. Amethyst Sapphire, number 1 played deck. Amethyst Steel, number 2 played deck. Amber Steel, number 3 played deck. The bigger difference here is some of the other numbers you're seeing is Amethyst Ruby came to play. Emerald Sapphire was a little bit more represented. Amber Emerald was a little bit more represented, but the rest of it kind of remained the same. Then there was, of course, the Orange County 6K. This was the 180-player tournament down in Orange County or Anaheim at the Expo event this past weekend. Amethyst Sapphire, number 1 played deck. Amethyst Steel, number 2. Amber Steel, number 3. Ruby Amethyst, number 4. And then Sapphire Steel coming in there also with Amber Emerald. While Ruby Steel made a big impact at this event, none of them made top cut, unfortunately. So as we're looking at all these events at once, you can see here's all of the registered decks from this past weekend. Obviously, the top 3 should not be a shock. They were the most played decks in the room in the events, and here they are now. Amethyst Sapphire coming at number 1, most played deck, over 100 copies registered this weekend. Amethyst Steel coming in with just over 80 registered. Amber Steel coming in with just under 60 registered. And then you have Sapphire Steel coming in almost 20. Amber Emerald sitting in there 10 to 15. Same for Emerald Sapphire and Amethyst Ruby, Ruby Steel, etc. And of course, other makes up the rest of this. The big question that you must be asking yourself, though, is yes, these were the registered decks, but how were they successful? How did the kind of like the breakdown go from registered to top 8 cuts? And it's going to be a bit of alarming because Amber Steel, yeah, there was a lot of those decks that were registered this weekend across the 3 events, but they didn't do very well, guys. It's yeah, they didn't do very well at all. So, let's take a look at that breakdown for you real quick because it is interesting. And if I'm being honest, yeah, that's tough to look at, right? If you're an Amber Steel fan, you got some stuff to figure out. You might have registered your deck this weekend, and it did not go as planned. It didn't go well at all. It didn't do what you wanted to do. It wasn't the metagame that you thought you could be successful in. As you can see here, we might have had 11 Amethyst or 12 Amethyst Sapphires. We might have had just under 8 Amethyst Steels. We might have had just under 2 Amber Steels in top 8s. That's bad. When you look at that number, when you go from one to the other and you say, man, there was nearly 60 Amber Steel decks registered, and then you go, wow, there was only one. And I do mean that, only one that made a top cut this weekend. I'd be worried. I'd be alarmed. We'd have to start figuring that one out. Sapphire Steel, also coming in at 1. Amber Emerald coming in at 1. Amethyst Ruby coming in at 1. So the metagame was absolutely dominated without a shadow of a doubt by Amethyst Sapphire and Amethyst Steel. There are going to be 3 of the decks that we look at, the most winning decks from these respective events this past weekend. But that really is telling the story, is that Amethyst Steel came in at under registered, but it won 2 of the events, and it had just about the same amount of top cuts. Amethyst Sapphire came in with the highest amount, highest turnover. That's just kind of a, by design, by example. And of course, the real question is how many of these decks had Dumbos in them? Was that difficult for players to do? And that's a lot of the conversation as well as you kind of move through and really discuss what the opening weekend of Disney kind of looked. But hey, data is everything. And this was 3 events, over, nearly 400 players registered in tournaments. And these were the decks that were there. These were the decks that we were looking at. So when you look at this top 8 breakdown and you say, man, Amethyst Sapphire, it might have had 100 registered decks, but 12 of them made top cuts. That's a big deal. Amethyst Steel may have had 80 registered decks, but hey, 10 of them might have made top cuts. That's a big deal. When you say 60 registered decks were Amber Steel and only 1 of them made a top cut, that's alarming, because you look at Sapphire Steel, Amber Emerald, and Amethyst Ruby, they had all about 20 registered decks, and they were still able to find success in different tournaments. And I think that that's really, really important to note as we go through to this. Quick reminder for everyone watching that this is sponsored by Heavy Play. Please check out the link in the description below. Pick up that deck box, pick up that dice box, maybe even grab yourself some sleeves and a playmat, and use TFM10 at checkout for 10% off your order. Thank you for the sponsor. Once again, Heavy Play. So now as we get into it, we start breaking down what Sapphire Amethyst looks like. And this was the 2nd place deck at SSG, the 126 player tournament. So this was one of the bigger events on the weekend. This was the 2nd place deck from it. Yes, it is a Dumbo version of this deck. And guys, let's be honest, a lot of the Sapphire Amethyst decks this weekend, they were Dumbos, but not all, I promise. However, this is what it looks like. This is the bigger event, the 2nd biggest event on the weekend, and the most successful deck in the room for that event for Sapphire Amethyst in this one. So as we look at it, you got Octopus, right? The wonderful, the only, the Royal Guard. It's great. It's a nice little 1-drop complimentary. We got Basil, complimentary, right? I think a lot of these versions of Sapphire Amethyst, you had a big choice to make. And the choice of week 1 was definitely going to be, hey, can I have no 1-drops in my deck? Honestly, we tested a lot of versions of this deck, and some of them we just said, you know what, we're always going to ink our 1-cost characters on the play and see if we can still beat Amber Steel. That really was not the case, but if we move into a format where Amber Steel wasn't successful and it might, go down in numbers, you might be able to get greedy and you might not have to play 6 or 8 1-cost characters. That opens up to be a little bit more techie for the mirror, a little bit more techie for other Amethyst decks and things like that. Tipo, obviously a standstill here. Salazar 8C, standstill there. But some of the tech cards and some of the more interesting cards that maybe we didn't expect week 1. Of course, the Madam Mim Elephant was probably a card that a lot of people were not seeing be played in these decks, right? It's not a card that was coming up or in the early versions of decks. It wasn't the one that was being, kind of just like let out there. But it's a card that basically everyone that was successful it found room for Elephant. Elephant's that powerful, it's that good, and it's good in both matchups. A lot of people were saying, oh, it's only good in your aggro, it's only good in your Sapphire Amethyst mirrors. That's not true. While it's good to have 4 more copies of Hades, 4 more copies of Elsa, 4 more copies of Belle, all those things are very true. It's still good in aggro because it's a 3/7. So very good. In Amethyst Steel, it's a 3/7. How do they answer that card and how do they interact with it? It's very, very good. But the other card here that came up a big and I think is really, really important to look at is the Rafiki. This Rafiki is a 4-cost uninkable, 1 strength, 4 willpower, 2 lore with rush. And the summoning spell, when you play this character, he gains Challenger +4 this turn. So it comes in as a 5/4 with rush. The problem is, for me, is that when you pass the turn, it's a 1/4, which means you can't get a 2-for-1 with this card very often. Most likely the card that picks this off is still sitting on the board. So it really becomes the question of, what do I need that 5 strength for when I come into play that's removing that something else isn't? Is it necessary that it has to have rush? I think that that's kind of the question that kind of has to keep coming up over the next couple weeks. This is a card that I'm very curious, maybe how Travis felt about at the end of the day, because I know TFM tested this card and it was something that we ended up not really liking over the course, and that's why it really didn't find home in our versions of the deck. But it's interesting, it's notable. The other big card that I really want to talk about here is Ursula Voice Stealer, the 5-cost inkable, 3 strength, 4 willpower, 1 lore with the ability Sing for Me. When you play this character, exert chosen opposing ready character, then you may play a song with the cost equal to or less than the exerted character's cost for free. Now, of course, if we look at this deck, you're saying, hey, there's only 3 Into the Unknowns. We're never going to sing a song. Well, dear friends, the good news about this is that it's not about singing. It's about exerting. So it is 5 worth it to exert a character that is inkable. This card is inkable, that exerts a character and then puts a body into play that just has a lore. That seems very debatable. I think that there's a chance that this card could see a little bit more play in Amethyst Steel, because exerting there, you have Calhoun, you have Tinkerbell, you have like more ways to interact and kind of like get over the hump and get a little bit more for this value. Whereas this deck doesn't necessarily have that challenging power. So to me, it's very interesting. But what I will say is if you get to exert a character and then Into the Unknown it, and it's like all technically free, and you leave a body like there, then maybe this Ursula does deserve a little bit more love than I'm giving it credit for. Nonetheless, I thought it was interesting. I think it's one of those cards that's going to stick out in these lists. When you really start breaking down Sapphire, Amethyst, and all of these decks, the cards that we're going to be picking out are the new ones, right? The Rafiki, the Ursula, in this version, the Magic Feather, right? What is Magic Feather doing for this deck? Now, Magic Feather, of course, is the 2-cost inkable item that is an Amethyst item, of course, with 2 abilities. Now you can fly. When you play this item, choose a character of yours while this item is in play. That character gains evasive and then has the ability ground it 3 ink to return this item to your hand. So you can definitely repeat this effect and give different characters evasive while you do it. It's a really interesting effect. It's not something that's very common for Disney Lorcana because it's difficult to kind of make these cards in the game, but this is the first time we're seeing the way to do it. So I do expect more of these to kind of happen moving forward. But yeah, so this is just a way to say like, hey, this gives my octopus evasive. Now all of a sudden I might have a way for my octopus to just take out a genie. That's kind of a big deal. It could take out an elephant. That's kind of a big deal. When you're talking about ways to interact with evasives in the mirror, I think it's kind of important. But it's also interesting to know that like even giving Donald Duck evasive might be weird and interesting. And I think that's really what we're looking at. This is a nice little niche way to maybe interact with the mirror a little bit better. If you're losing the genie war, how do I interact with genies? The other thing it does hilariously is give a card like Tipo the Dumbo effect, which I think is kind of fun and interesting as well. As you're like, oh, like I just have this Tipo laying around, but now I can play a Magic Feather, make my Tipo evasive, and all of a sudden just using my Tipo to pay 1 and draw a card because of Dumbo. Super interesting, super cool. Wonder how much it came up in testing. Shout out to Travis again for a lot of definitely unique choices in this particular deck. Here we are. Zach Bivens is back. He's back in action from Worlds, showing up to the SSG here and finding a top 8 in the opening weekend of a 126-player tournament. Nobody's shocked, right? I mean, like, how can you be shocked? But let's look at what Zach is cooking here. So Amethyst Steel, obviously one of the more dominant decks on the weekend, and Bivens came to play. He came to be a fairly interesting version of this deck. The first thing I want to shout out here is the Jafar. The Jafar is a very, very interesting, unique tech choice because it is one of those cards that I think people have been playing Smee in over, Mr. Smee over Jafar. And I want to tell you hilariously why we decided the Jafar was better than Mr. Smee. So the Jafar Royal Advisor is the 2-cost inkable, 3 strength, 2 willpower, 1 lore with the ability I don't trust him, sire. You may, during your turn, this character gains evasive. So why is this card strictly better than Mr. Smee? Well, the fact is that if you are not a pirate and you do not have pirate synergy, you should be playing Jafar over your Mr. Smees because there is the Emerald Steel Captain Hook in the format that kind of like turns off pirate effects, which I think is really comical. And it's Likely never something that's going to happen, but the fact that it can means that this Jafar is just strictly better than Mr. Smee. Just a little tidbit of a point there that this is a card that you should be playing over it. But hey, if you're a Mr. Smee fan, probably won't matter. Probably won't come up. The other concept here, of course, is that we are a Dumbo version of Amethyst Steel. And I think this is really just paying tribute to what Bivens kind of just agrees with most about Amethyst decks, is that you should be the deck that's drawing cards. And, Wild Doc is phenomenal. Wild Genie is good enough. Wild Diablo is cool. This is a version that's not playing Cusco. It's not playing that extra little smidge of draw potential. So just playing Dumbo, having Genie, even playing Happy without Mines is quite notable. And of course, your Elsas enables Dumbo to be just an overall pretty good card in this deck. But what I will say, and this is more of a question in general for maybe Bivens himself, is there a world where this is just a worse Dumbo deck? Is it possible? Is it possible that Bivens is just playing to, his feelings and playing to his, kind of like natural, like just acceptance that he loves steel decks? Like, let's be honest, guys, a lot of times he's been successful with steel decks, so it's not too shocking here that we're gravitating towards that. But my question is Dumbo necessary evil in Amethyst Steel, or can we build the deck without Dumbo and still be successful? Can we, kind of mold around different ways to draw cards and different ways to interact with the board to get card advantage? That drawing cards isn't as important, and just maybe accept that Dumbo is strictly for Sapphire? Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but that's the question I want to leave you. Do you think Dumbo is just good in all Amethyst decks? If you know, let me know in the comments below. I'm of the belief that you can probably build Amethyst Steel without Dumbo, and we're going to be talking about one of those decks pretty soon here, but that's really where I'm at. I don't know. You let me know. Breaking down the rest of Mr. Bivens' deck here, big important notes here: 11 one-cost characters, followed by the Mim Tiny Adversary. I think Mim Tiny Adversary is a really interesting character. It's a card I've been talking about for a while. The 2-cost Inkable, 0 strength, 3 willpower, 1 lore, challenger +1, and of course that crazy name. I'll try it again. Zimzaburn Bomb. I'm not even sure, guys, but let's be honest. It's your other characters gain challenger +1 as well. It turns your Diablo into a way to have some bit of strength. Nothing crazy there. Captain Hook gets the big buff, goes to 4, gets to remove a nice character. Happy gets a little buff. These things that are pretty important if you need them to be. Of course, what this does for Happy is it turns Happy into a way to kind of remove Calhoun that you can see in this deck as well. So Calhoun and Dox are your unlinkables of choice. Jafar, this deck, it's coming in here with a big whopping 15 2-drop. So we are very, very low to the ground on our curve. We got the 4 Giant Cobra, 1 White Roses. That's a big talking point as well. And then you have the Genie at 4 of. You have Jafar over Lilo. I have to believe that this is an educated choice for Bivens and not a choice to not have Lilos. I have to imagine that he definitely had access to being Lilos. He's a Southside Gaming member. This event was at Southside Gaming, which means he would have had the choice to play Lilos over Jafar if he wanted it, but it was specific that he wanted this Jafar. It was likely for 2 lore to get under the Sapphire Amethyst decks, of course. And then we have the Dumbo, we got the Genies, the Bells. 4 Bells, by the way. This is not necessarily a common trait for Amethyst Steel decks. Normally they come in around 2 or 3, but we're just kind of under the acceptance that, like, listen, if we're being completely honest, without a shock to anyone, Bell is one of the best removal cards in the format. So having 4 of them in every Amethyst deck, it's not too shocking. You shouldn't be too shocked. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. And of course, Hypnotic Strength coming in there in some number, and then the best removal card in the format, Strength of Raging Fire. So if you know the Strength of the Raging Fire is the best song removal, it's functionally better than Into the Unknown most of the time. And that Bell is the best character removal. Well, playing 4 of each, it just makes sense, right? It just makes sense, guys. Let's be honest with ourselves. All in all, I think that this is a pretty good deck for week 1. I think it's interesting. I think doubling down on the draw mechanics of Amethyst, having the 4 Dumbo, again, you have 4 Doc, 4 Dumbo, Genie, Diablo, all ways to kind of card filter, which is really nice. And it's to the boot. It has the Hypnotic Strength as well. There's a lot of ways to catch aggro off guard in this. I do wonder moving forward, like, hey, do we still need this much commitment to the aggro matchups with the cards, basically like Hypnotic Strength? Like, do we still need that card in week 2? These are things I would be looking at. But huge shout out again to Zach for picking up the top 8 at the SSG this past weekend. Now let's talk about the third most played deck and the only deck in top 8. And it was played by my student, Ben Ramos. We call him Bucky, but he picked top 8 this past weekend in the 74-player 9-case event hosted by TFM, partnering with the Encounter. And here it is, guys, straight to the metals, to the floor. Lots of interesting tech choices here. This was a TFM Amber Steel deck. This is a deck that we had been testing. This is a deck that was taken to a top 10 on the ladder. Yes, you know what I'm talking about. But let's be honest here. We're moving forward, and this is kind of just the understanding of how Amber Steel needs to win on the draw. You can't just be it all. You have to have interactions. This is where cards like Stitch come into play. This is where cards like Lilo come into play. Just understanding, like, if I lose the die roll, I have to find a way to win going second, and there has to be lines to doing so. So Stitch, the alien troublemaker, is the 4-cost inkable, 3-strength, 4 willpower, 1 lore with the ability I win. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may draw a card and gain 1 lore. Now, if we talk about that card for a second, you might say, it's too slow. How does it work in aggro? Well, the truth is that aggro is in trouble. And I think the reason why Ben was able to find success this past weekend was because he had ways to win going second. It's a big deal. That's what this card offers you. It offers you a character that can challenge, interact with the board, likely survive, gain you a lore, and draw you a card. It seems too slow. It seems ridiculous. But the truth is that this is what the kind of card that this deck needs to maintain success. Having Calhoun, having Stitch going second is the key pieces here. Those are the big turning points. The other cards here, of course, is like you still have Rhino. Rhino's obviously very good. We still have Daisy Duck, and we still have Nala. When we go first, we're obviously going to alter our 7 cards to be the best version of our ways to win going first. So you still need all these cards, but you really understand that going second, these cards are not good. So you should not have 4 of them in your deck. You should not have this overwhelming amount of commitment to the Tiana strategy. Like, yeah, even in this version, there's only 2 Tianas, that's not 4. Because the truth is that the uninkable counts are worrisome, but it's also to the nature of that you need to win going second. How do you commit to the board? How do you play the game going second if all of your strategy lies on Daisy Duck and lies on Nala, it lies on Tiana? Like, how do you win going second? Well, you do that by creating positions for yourself that on the draw going second, you alter for these particular things. And that's where I think this deck is being successful. And that's the big deal here. You can see here, 3 Fire the Cannon, 2 Smash. These are not cards that, generally speaking, aggro decks are successful with, but it's really just the acceptance of saying, you know what, I need these cards. I need this removal to find a way to be successful in it. A huge, and I do mean this, an absolute huge shout out to Ben. I'm so proud of you. This is an event that he was going for. We had a coaching session last week. We had the conversation of like what he needed to be successful in it, and it worked out. He showed up. He went 5-1-1, found his way into a top 8. He did lose in the top 8 to the first seeded player, Logan, and we're going to be talking about his deck shortly here. And there will be gameplay of this deck on the TFM channel by the end of the week, so definitely look out for that. If you want to see this deck in action, it was a tough matchup for him. He was going second, but there will be this deck as well. So definitely hit subscribe right now if you're not, so you can see some of the gameplay from this event and some of the decks that we're showcasing in this event on stream. So, but then again, what I said, huge shout out to Bucky. Congratulations for you. Thank you for believing in me as a coach. And it really means all the world to me that you found success in your first tournament of the set 2 rotation. Now, of course, looking at this deck just a little bit longer, it has all of the normal tools that you want to be winning going first. It's understanding that Captain Hook is a necessary evil. Penny, really great card to interact with the board when you need to. Pluto still is going to protect all of your really good starts. You know, again, turn 1 Daisy, turn 2 Nala, turn 3, generally speaking, Lady into Penny. Penny giving your Daisy or your Nala another resist is a really, really big deal when you're turning sideways. And then you can follow up with that with the Pluto to protect everything on the final turn. And you might just win the game on the spot on turn 4. It's very, very possible that your just opponent is so far out of the game if they didn't find the answer to Pluto. It's just ridiculous. And then, of course, you still have Tiana lines. Tiana plus whatever is still a very, very good lock. The other big core concept of this deck is learning when to stand up. It's learning when to not turn sideways. Remember, guys, there's no board wipes in the game. There's only one Elsa, right? Like, Under the Sea is a problem, which is why this deck, I think, is one of the only steel decks that's still going to play Peak Games Referee, because Under the Sea is a really big problem. whenever your opponent would have a good opportunity to play an action or a song, Pete is still there. But it's really because I think Pete is a card that's only going to be strictly good in aggro versions of decks. I think if you're playing mid-range, Pete just falls off the board because you can't guarantee when your opponent is ever going to play an action, and therefore I would be removing Pete. If you're looking for room in your decks to find out and try and test new cards, drop your Pete numbers, potentially to 0. If I'm being completely honest, the format is just not really about him. But all in all, this deck has found a way. It's probably one of the more strategic ways to play this deck in the format because you just have to accept 50% of the time you're going to be going second, and you need to find a way to win. And a lot of these versions of this deck, I think they relied way too much on the die roll. Again, shout out to Ben. Huge congratulations on your top 8. No Dumbo, no problem. Can decks win without this big-eared elephant? While Amethyst was the most played ink, Amber Steel, Amber Emerald, and Sapphire Steel all had success this weekend as well. So don't just fret if you cannot get Dumbos yet, if they're too expensive, if they're out of your budget. We're going to showcase some decks that are very good and had success this past weekend without Dumbo. Number 1, the second place finish at the Orange County 6K 180-player tournament was... That's right, guys. It was dogs. Amber Emerald dogs. Shout out to Michael on this finish and really bringing some creative choices to it as well. So, of course, the first card that has to stick out is that bottom right corner. Hey, you probably have no idea what that card does. Well, that card, the 2-cost inkable item called Scrump with the ability I Made Her. Exert one of your character's chosen character gets -2 until the start of your next turn. So what this really weirdly does is that it gives you multiple effects, okay? So basically, every single one of your characters gains the ability to exert to then give something -2. This deck is very good at going very wide. So having this crazy amount of cards in play that all have the same ability to exert down and then give a character -2 and then enable your bigger cards to team up to sing together under the sea means that you might be able to clear the board better than any other deck in the format while having this crazy wide board that over the next 2 turns just simply turns sideways and wins you the game. I think this is a very unique and adaptation to this deck. It might be a card that even most of the other Amber decks is going to find a way to utilize and be successful with. Really interesting interactions because this is just a dogs deck aside from that. This is a very much straightforward aggro deck that's going to win a lot of games just by turning sideways. But now you have this interesting new way to kind of just remove so many other characters from play with that setup. I wonder how many times there was a true, look to it and saying like, man, I just got my opponent, right? Like I totally just caught them off guard and I was able to get it. But I think it's okay because right now, I mean, who's playing answers items? Right? Have you seen any Benjes in any lists? Like, listen, again, Dreamborn has a copy of every single top 8 deck from this past weekend. There's no Benjes. There's no hot potatoes. There's like nothing, right? Like, there's nothing. So Scrump is a card that you can kind of get away with. I think it's cool. I think it's interesting. Aside from that, this is a dogs deck. But you know what, guys? There's no Dumbos because there's no Amethyst. So for this deck to finish in second place of a 180-player tournament, obviously, I do think this is a deck, again, this is a deck that's not easy to play. It's not a deck that I think anyone can pick up and just say, like, oh, I'm going to play to the tournament for the first time. Don't do that, okay? Like, take this deck list, sleeve it up, go to your locals this week, play some games with it, find a way to be successful, right? That's what's really important here. But it is nice to say that, hey, not every deck needs Dumbo. That's a big requirement. The next deck, of course, is Sapphire Steel. Jason found his way into a top 4 at a 180-player tournament this past weekend at Orange County in the 6K. So here we have it, Sapphire Steel. This is just a basic version of Control. It's really an understanding of like why this card and why this deck has a chance to be good. In an Amber Steel field, this deck is just incredible. It might give a lot of problems to Amethyst Steel as well, if I'm being completely honest. Like a 5/5 is no joke. Giving all your characters ward is really effective. Jasmine, the Fearless Princess, one of the new cards in the format, the 5-cost inkable, 3 strength, 7 willpower, 2 lore with the ability Take the Leap. During your turn, this character gains evasive, and Now's my chance. Choose and discard a card. This character gains Challenger +3 to this till this turn. So when you start talking about ways to kind of remove some big characters, Jasmine might be the answer. Jasmine might be the way to get rid of cards like Elephant, cards like Hades. Like discarding one card and removing your opponent's Hades is it's notable, right? Like you want to get rid of that 3/6, get it off the field. You know, discarding one card, getting rid of your opponent's Tinks, big deal. Discarding one card, getting rid of Elsa's, getting rid of Genies, like it seems crazy, but if you have to play another card to interact with the Genie anyway, to interact with the Hades anyway, you may as well do it with a character in play. Obviously, the other big card that I love, you know, this was a set 8 print, was Vincenzo, the 7-cost inkable, 2 strength, 8 willpower, 3 lore with the ability. I just like to blow things up. When you play this character, you may deal 3 damage to a chosen character. You know, we're talking about a deck here that has Sally Azerite Seed, has Pleakley, it's got Doc. You know, there's obviously there's Beyond the Horizon. There's lots of ways to draw cards and fill back up and kind of just put bombs in play. What I want to say, what I think is very, very important, guys, is I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm just trying to be truthful here. There's no scars in this deck. I'm just saying. It's not. Is it an ally deck? Yeah, mostly. They're basically all allies, right? Like all these cards are conditional allies in most cases. But listen, Scar, it's an uninkable. Its stats are terrible. It doesn't do anything to turn you play it. And the real truth is that you have to get rid of a character when you use it. I'm not sold on it yet, guys. We'll see. We'll see in the coming weeks if that card comes up. But right now, I would not be rushing to buy Scars. I would, this deck right here, like this version of this deck that we're looking at, I think this is a better deck than Scar. I'm just being truthful, right? So I think this is a really unique way. It's a nice thing to say, like, hey, there's no Dumbos in this deck. We don't need them. And we just have, if I'm being honest, stats, right? Like this deck is just stats, and it's really annoying stats. They're just hard to get around. It has a lot of ways to just win the game. I mean, look at this. Scrooge, Aurora, Jasmine, Robin, Tinkerbell, Vincenzo, Hades. They're just stats. They all just gain lore, you know? Like, it's very, very important to note that these cards just gain lore. I think this is a really interesting version of this deck. Again, you can see Smash is hanging out in here. So understanding that you have Smash, you have Strength of a Raging Fire, you know, these are really, really important facts of just saying, like, I need interaction to the board, and this is how I'm going to get it. So all in all, I think this deck is really, really nice. I think it's one of the better designed Sapphire Seal lists that I've seen. Huge shout out to Jason. Again, top 4, 180 players, no Dumbos, no Amethyst. Gotta love it. Ruby Amethyst makes an appearance in top 8s this past weekend, while it being one of the most underplayed decks of the format. Now, I will say it is notable that SSG did have the most played Ruby Amethyst decks out of the 3 tournaments that we're covering in this particular meta report. So having 11 or 12 of them, I think it was, having one find a top 8, it is not necessarily that shocking because of the amount played, but it's also saying, like, hey, maybe Eric has figured it out here. Eric finding his way into a nice little home, 10 1-drops, having the Lumiere, I think is really, really important. Having the Queen of Hearts, I think absolutely blows out Amber Steel decks and just aggro decks in general that turn sideways early. And of course, we're floating around with a couple new 3-drops. Madame Medusa, the Deceiving Partner, 3-cost inkable, 3 strength, 3 willpower, 1 lore with the ability Double Cross. When you play this character, you may deal 2 damage to another chosen character of yours to return chosen character with cost 2 or less to their player's hand. You come in, you put damage on the Queen of Hearts, you banish, you return another card to a opponent's hand, and then Queen of Hearts takes something out. It's the best 2-for-1 that Ruby Amethyst has to do right now. But this deck is also sporting other 3-cost characters, and they're very unique and interesting and good. 3-cost Inkable, Mother, Gothel, the Vain Sorceress, 1 strength, 4 willpower, 1 lore, with the ability, Now You've Upset Me. Whenever one of your characters challenges, you may move 1 damage counter from chosen character to chosen opposing character. So you might have a character that wants to challenge, you can move one of your damage off another character, put it onto them, and then finish them off in a challenge. And this is every character. It's not even like it's just this character. The turn you play it, you can challenge with your Mulan, move a damage from it, take out a character, and it might actually, like, it might just live, right? Like, it might just live. What if we just get to move a damage and then move 1 damage to a Diablo and then put 2 damage on another character? Really, really good. Can create more 2-for-1s. I really like it. The last, of course, is the Prince John, the Fraidy Cat, the 3-cost inkable, 5 strength, 5 willpower, 1 lore with the ability Help, Help. Whenever an opponent plays a character, deal 1 damage to this character. And this is just all the synergy that I'm talking about here. This puts synergy on for Queen of Hearts. It puts synergy on for Mother Gothel. Like, it puts synergy on for Mulan. Like, it's just a lot of things that's going on here that I think it all really. Also, huge shout out to the wonderful Everybody's Got a Weakness. This is a perfect card for it. Moving one damage counter from each damage character you have in play to chosen opposing character. Draw one card for each damage character move this way. This is just a nice little thing here. This is also playing a card that I've been talking about a little bit, and really just to the point of how important it is to be able to exert characters, right? Like, Lose the Way is a 2-cost inkable, and it's exert chosen character, and then you may choose and discard a card. If you do, the exerted character can't ready the start turn. Now, granted, I don't think we're doing that necessarily in this deck. There's not enough draw power to do it, but maybe if you have to, you have to, right? Like, it's totally possible. But what it's doing is, for 2 cost and inkable, we get to exert a character. We've seen Ursula so far. We know of Elsa. There's some other options that kind of do similar things, but it's really just playing that note that right now Amethyst has the ability to exert characters, and you got to find maybe more ways to use them than just Elsa. And this is a cheaper way to do that. Obviously, you don't get a 3/4 like the Ursula is, but for 2, you might be able to interact and like do some really cool things with those extra few recesses for the rest of the turn, which I think is very, very important. So when you're talking about this deck and you're really starting to look at it and say like, hey, how do I make it good? How do I make it playable? Ruby Amethyst, this is probably the script that I would go off of right now. This draw is at a premium. So having 0 Finders Keepers, but playing Yzma might be kind of telling you that Finders Keepers is a bit difficult to play right now. There's a lot of board states where if you're behind, you can't just take a turn off to draw 3 cards because you don't have a Be Prepared. You don't have a Sisu. A lot of times we've seen in the past that this deck will take a turn off because you can get the turn back later by clearing the board. That's not true anymore, and that's a big deal. That's notable that this deck is understanding, like, you know what? I have to play that gamble. I have to put a card into play that's going to draw me cards after the fact. So huge shout out to Eric finding a top 8 this past weekend with Ruby Amethyst. Here we have Amethyst Steel. This was played by Sean at the TFM event this past weekend, 74 players, and it, again, no Dumbos. We don't need him. It's not a big deal. We can build a version of this deck without him, and I think Sean did a really, really good job of doing so. And this is a really nice version of this deck. We saw the Bivens deck earlier that was about Dumbos. It had the genies, it had happies, it had a lot of interactions here. This is still a version of the deck that has genie. The other thing that I really, really want to shout about this deck, no new cards, right? There's no Lilos in this deck. There's none of that. We didn't need new cards this past weekend, and this is Sean living proof, showing up to an event, big event, lots of prizing on the line, and he was able to do it without a new card. That's important. I think that's a big shout out, because you have to understand that just because you can't get new cards, just because you don't want to pay new prices, it does not mean that you can't show up to a tournament and be successful in the opening weekend. So huge shout out to Sean for that. Breaking down the rest of his deck, of course, you have the nice lineup here of the 4 willpower cards. We have the Palace Guards. We got the Cobras. We have Genie, right? Like, we have these high willpower cards that get to pair with Panic. Panic, the high strung imp, is the 4-cost inkable, 2 strength, 3 willpower, 2 lore with the ability Startled Shriek. When you play this character, you may move up to 2 damage counters from chosen character to chosen opposing character. Now, what did we talk about before? Well, we talked about how Bell was the best removal card in the format. Well, now we get to double down, right? Like, this deck has 3 Bells, 2 Panics, because you have characters that have damage just sitting on them. So all of a sudden, if Panic can come into play, help you finish off characters, help you get that trade, maybe you're a little bit behind in the matchup, your opponent turned its Genie sideways, you're like, yeah, whatever, my Genie's turned sideways, I gained my 2 lore, your Genie can't interact unless you play another card, yada, yada. Well, if all of a sudden you turn your Genie sideways, and you get 2 damage on theirs, you take the 2 damage back, and you play Pain, and you move the last 2 damage over to them, all of a sudden, boom, you're back in this game. It's not over. You have a chance to kind of get back, and that's plays like that how you win games going second. And I think Panic is doing such a good job at that, because it's not only are you getting that effect, you're getting the secondary concept that Bell is coming as well. Like, having the wonderful Panicked on turn 4 saves your character, which means you have damage left over for the following turn, and you just get to continuously come back and come from behind with these characters. And I think that's so very important. Sean also playing Smash. This is a pretty common theme that we're seeing with a lot of these successful Steel decks, is that yeah, Strength of a Raging Fire is the best removal in the format. You can only play 4 of them. So having Smash is attributing to that as well. Just noting, like, hey, I really just, it's not, listen, all right? Like, I explained it this weekend. Smash is not a card that I'm like, man, I want to play Smash. Like, no, I don't want to play Smash, but I accept that I might have to. Like, there's just not enough removal in the format. It's nothing. There's never ever a turn where I'm like, oh yeah, I get to play Smash this turn. Like, it doesn't exist. But it's really just accepting, like, you know what? You might just need it. And there's a theme of all of these decks this past weekend. Like, Smash was in there. Like, Smash or Fire the Cannons, some number of that card was lingering in those decks. And I really attribute to that to maybe why they were able to win going second. Just understanding that you might need this much removal just to edge out that extra 5%, that extra 10% going second to get closer to that 50% threshold that we're looking for. It might be attributed to those cards. So it's just a theme that I'm catching up in this meta report. It's not a card that's pretty. It's ugly. I don't want to play it. I get it, but you might have to. Big winners from this weekend for me: Doc Bold Knight, Bell Accomplished Mystic, Genie Wish Fulfilled, Strength of a Raging Fire, Dumbo 9 Fun of the World, Hades Infernal Schemer, Elsa the Fifth Spirit, and Giant Cobra the Ghostly Serpent. My question to you, of course, let me know. What were your big winners? Was it just these cards? No, I don't think so. I think there's some other cards that we can talk about, but this was clearly the most themed, probably the most played, probably the most registered cards in every tournament this past weekend. Were these ones? What do you think it was? Speaking of big winners, we had Logan Taylor, also known as Zenulus of Team Maelstrom, picked up a top 4 split, but he was the number 1 player in the room. He was 6-0-1, 1 into unintentional draw. He had to play in his pair down round when he was 5-0, and he was able to sweep the room. He was able to win his top 8 match 2-0. Again, that match will be on the channel later on in the week. He did play the Amber Steel deck going first because he had seeding. So the big takeaways from this deck is that it pretty much looks like everything else, but there's 2 standout cards that I think are important to note. And those 2 wonderful cards are TikTok and Baymax. So TikTok is the 6-cost inkable, 4 strength, 7 willpower, 1 lore with evasive. If I'm being honest, all I need to say about this card, stats. That's it. That's all I gotta say. All right. It's a 4/7. It's big. It's got evasive. It's thick. Like, it answers just about everything in the format. Your Dumbo turns sideways, no problem. Genie turns sideways, no problem. Like, it's got 7 willpower. 7 willpower is a huge threshold. That's not easy to get to. So I think that it's a cute little thing. It's good. It's interesting. But you know what? It's big. All right. It's got stats. The other card, of course, in this deck was Baymax. Baymax, the Armored Companion, which is the 5-cost inkable 2/6 with 2 lore and the ability, the treatment is working. When you play this character and whenever he quests, you may remove up to 2 damage from another chosen character of yours and gain 1 lore for each 1 damage removed this way. And listen, this probably looks weird, right? Probably a card, but here's what I'll tell you. Zenulus, yeah, he said this card gained 30 lore. Yeah, 30. 3-0. That's a lot of lore. So when you start hearing those types of numbers, you go, okay, like 30 lore, it's 7 rounds, 8 rounds. You played 7 of them and he gained 30. That's a lot of lore. So that's all I'm going to say about that card, is that's a comment that he made. Maybe I'll put it in the tweet. Like, we'll put it up across the board so you can see it. But that's a comment, guys. Like, 30 lore is a lot. So aside from that, I don't think there's anything crazy going on here. I think they're seeing a lot of the same trends. Again, every single Sapphire Amethyst deck that was in a top 8 this past weekend, go down, hit the description. You can see them all. There's a lot of common themes, okay? Dumbos, Genies, Iagos, Elephants, Bells, Elsa, Hades, Elsa, like Sail, Tipa, right? The Basil and Rafiki, Basil and Royal Guard, like the choices are all there. And that's the core, right? The core is there. It all exists for you to go and see. But it's the tech cards that are the questions. It's the tech cards that look the most interesting. Baymax and TikTok stick out for Logan here. Huge congrats on your buy, right? This was it. Shout out to Pro Play Games. It's coming up in just 2 weeks from the recording of this video, and it is a CCQ. Logan earned himself a buy this weekend. Also, I'm going to double down here. Sapphire Amethyst in my regional here. We had this event, PPG event on Sunday. Sapphire Amethyst won the buy. Sapphire Amethyst also won the buy on Sunday. Shout out to TFM Nunez for picking up a buy for that CCQ as well. If you're coming to Pro Play Games, I am your host. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be a lot of fun. Make sure, if you haven't yet picked up that ticket, CCQ, guys, it's the first opportunity. You could be the first player that gets an invite to Continentals. I'm just saying, that's a big deal. If you're a grinder, if you're a player that wants to be in Continentals, you got to take every opportunity you can. Get to that event. Go register right now. Description in the link for that description in that event below. The other big winner from this past weekend was Thiago, first place pickup win at the SSG 126 player tournament, and it's a Dumbo deck, guys. But this Dumbo deck has some unique and really, really fun and interesting qualities. The first and foremost, it's playing that Jasmine I talked about earlier. She's big, she's thick, and she answers just about everything in the format, which is awesome. Tiny Adversary Mim, but not only do we have Skater Mim, we also have another 2-drop, the wonderful Raja, the 2-cost 3/3, 1 lore with Vanish, of course, which is not a great keyword, but it's an illusion, which is a point in characteristics, because this deck is playing Treasure Guardian. That's right, the 4-cost Inkable, 3-strand, 3 willpower, 2 lore, with the ability that when you play this, if you have a illusion character in play, you get to draw a card. That's a little bit unique. It's a little bit different. I like that. I've seen cards like Treasure Guardian, cards like Yzma, cards like Dolores, all kind of finding a way and homes into these decks, and it's nice to see there's a lot of choice there. Again, a lot of these decks do look pretty much the same. Diablo, Captain Hook, Doc, Calhoun, Cobra, Elsa, Genie, Bell, Strength of a Raging Fire. So those are the core that you're really looking at. So when you get to see these other pieces that come in, you go, okay, I'm seeing a trend here. Now this one, another Dumbo deck. Both of the Amethyst Steel decks from this event were Dumbo decks at SSG. So hey, Dumbo wasn't that hard to find in Margate, Florida this past weekend. But nonetheless, huge shout out to Thiago here picking up a sweet victory. The last victor of the weekend was also the Salty Duck, first place pickup at the Orange County 6K, 180 players, and I love this deck. This is a deck that I've been very high on recently because I'm a big Seven Dwarves Mines fan. I think that this is a card that's so very good in the metagame. I personally think that it's better than Smash because it also gains you lore. It's also it's a card that like forces interaction from your opponent. When you put this card into play, and you're not putting it in play on turn 2, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's not when you play this card. You play this card on turn 5, on turn 6. You get to utilize it right away. You move your Happy to it. You move your Doc to it. You get some damage in there. And now you have a card in play that's really forcing interaction. Because if your opponent can't just sit there forever and let you gain lore forever, right? Like, it's just not a thing that they can do. Not to mention when you can start moving your characters to it, picking off characters that way. A tribute to, of course, we have Fire the Cans in this list. This is also a Dumbo deck. So, a couple of these lists that were really successful this past weekend for Amethyst Steel were Dumbo versions, but I'm still kind of going down that line of thinking, hey, is Amethyst Steel a Dumbo deck? Is it not a Dumbo deck? How do we build this deck with or without it? Do we need it? That's the big requirement. It's a big question for me. And it's definitely something I'm going to be covering in our Amethyst Steel guide this week. If you haven't yet, definitely check out the pinned comment. Go pick up the Amethyst Steel guide for this. But nonetheless here, this is another deck. Again, 2 big wins, right? Like, that's the real big takeaway. 2 big wins for Amethyst Steel. In 2 of the 3 events, Amethyst Steel won the event at the conclusion of it. We had a top 4 split at our event this past weekend. We went home a little bit early, but there were 2 Amethyst Steels in top 4 that certainly could have laid claim to a victory as well. We might have had 3 Amethyst Steel decks win all 3 tournaments in America this weekend. We don't know, but hey, it was possible. It could have happened. Nonetheless, are you a little worried? Are you worried that Amethyst Steel is too good? I'm not. I'm ecstatic because you know what? I've said this for weeks now. Go back. We had a guide for Amethyst Steel weeks ago because we're talking about all the versions of this deck and how you can play it. And yeah, we were right, guys. It was successful. I'm very excited for it. But there's not the last thing, right? The last thing we want to really talk about today, and I think it's really cool, and that is the tech. Like this past weekend, guys, there was so much cool, interesting cards finding success in Disney Lorcana. This is just a small list of them, right? Seven Dwarves Mines, Robin Hood, TikTok, Second Star to the Right, Scrump, Timothy Mouse, Cusco, and of course Genie. And we can make an argument that maybe Genie is in tech, but I still kind of lean towards that it is. I think if you're a Dumbo deck, you're always going to play it, but I don't think all Amethyst Steel decks are necessarily going to play it, so I'm still leaving it in the tech choice option. But yeah, man, there was so much tech this past weekend. And I think that it's so cool because it really showing that, you know what, right now, Amethyst Steel might have a core, but the core is 45, 40 cards. And then those last 15, 20 cards are really educated choices that you're making for the metagame. Amethyst Sapphire, it definitely has a core, but when you start telling me that Cusco is an option, Camilo Madrigal, that's right. Yeah, saw that one this weekend. Cusco, I just said, but TikTok, Baymax, right? Like you have all these different choices that you're kind of just creating for yourself in those last 5, 6 cards in your deck. I love that. Steel, 7 Dwarves Mines. Amber, picking up Scrump in the Amber Emerald deck for dogs. That's a really cool choice. There's a lot of really cool things that interesting that are going on. Timothy Mouse was a deck that I'm going to be covering in the guide and really talking about the power of willpower. Palace Guard on 1, Timothy Mouse on 2, Genie on 3. Turn 4, you have Panics, you have Genies, like you have all these ways, and it's just a lot of willpower. If you tell me I put 12 willpower in play for the first 3 turns of the game, how does Sapphire Amethyst deal with that? They just don't have a good enough way to like deal with those cards unless they go back to playing Yelena, which, you go look at those decks. I don't think Yelena's in any of them. And I mean that. Like that's a card that they're not playing right now. They're ramping to put a 4-cost card into play on 3, which is great, but they're no longer playing Scrooge McDuck. Again, that card didn't really show up. While people are high on it, it didn't show up in successful decks this past weekend. So there's a couple things to note, all in all about the event. Lastly, of course, we did a whole Amethyst Steel guide. It's on the channel. Go check out the video. If you want even more, it's a Metafy guide that we have. This is a card that we're really, really excited for. But listen, if you got through this and you like information like this, you want to hear more about Amethyst Steel, go click this video right now. Thank you guys so much for watching it. If you haven't yet, hit like. If this video is helpful for you, definitely share with your friends. It shares with us. Again, deck lists are all of them. Every single top 8 deck list down below. Go click it. Make sure you hit hearts on it. You can give us a little bit love on Dreamboard and things like that. Thank you guys so much for watching today. We will catch you at Ink this past weekend or this upcoming weekend. If you're there, I'll be there. I'll catch you at PPG in a couple weekends. Definitely check that all. Thank you guys so much. We'll catch you later.